Welcome. I am Beth with GeekWire, and on behalf of the GeekWire Studios team, welcome to today's session, Improving the Patient Experience, Unlocking Value-Based Care, sponsored by Opala. Today, we're going to learn how health plans and healthcare providers are transitioning from fee-for-service to value-based care. But first, it's time to get ready for the return of the GeekWire Gala. Our festive year-end celebration, GeekWire Gala, presented by First Tech, is coming on Wednesday, December 7th at 6 p.m. You'll enjoy great conversation, festive drinks, mocktails, cocktails, great music in the heart of Seattle. It's the year-end celebration that's finally returning after a hiatus since 2019. We're thrilled to welcome the tech community back to celebrate together. And by attending today's event, you've earned a 15% discount on GeekWire Gala tickets. So go to geekwire.com/gala and register, use GALA15 as your promo code, and we'll see you on December 7th. Now, we've all done this plenty. We know the routine. If you have questions during today's fantastic panel, you can submit those using the Q&A function. Thanks for all the great questions that were submitted when you registered. We will do our best to get to those questions and others that are submitted. So please submit those questions as they come to you. Now it's my pleasure to introduce today's moderator. Today's moderator is Opala CEO Ken Chandler. Ken is a strategic healthcare leader with over 30 years of experience in healthcare operations. Prior to joining Opala, Ken was with Semira Blue Cross, serving as Senior Vice President of National Accounts, responsible for nearly $9 billion in a book of business that included the most complex, difficult, sophisticated employer plans. Ken also served as chairman of the Consortium of Health Plans Board of Directors and drove product solutions aimed at improving access to healthcare innovations. And he's a great leader to serve in Opala's mission to flow data across healthcare so that every patient's experience is optimized. Please welcome Ken Chandler.
Good morning, and thank you, Beth. As Beth mentioned, I'm Ken Chandler, CEO of Opala. I want to say thank you to GeekWire for hosting this webinar that's focused on a few success stories among two of the largest providers in the Pacific Northwest. Today on our panel, we have Anna Taylor, the Associate Vice President for Population Health and Value-Based Care from MultiCare Connected Care. And next we have Semira Singh, Director of Population Health Management at Providence. Welcome to you both. So let's get started. Anna, I'm going to go to you first. In your role at MultiCare, I know you spend a lot of time on interoperability. Why is that? And what is your approach?
Thanks, Ken, and thanks for the introduction. The reason why we are focused on building the infrastructure for interoperability is, number one, we know improving the patient experience takes getting the right data and information to the point of care. And health data and information doesn't just live at your doctor's office, lives on a Fitbit, it lives on your watch or your smartphone. Any of those devices has health information, your electronic scale. If it's a connected thing, it holds information that could help physicians and clinicians be more successful in managing care in a partnership. So it's very important for us to interoperate, meaning how does that data in your Fitbit or your scale or your watch get to point A to point B so that it can inform a decision at the point of care when you're in the doctor's office. It is not Willy Wonka in the chocolate factory where it magically goes into space and ends up on the other side as a miniature person or a miniature chocolate bar. It takes infrastructure and it takes time and attention to enable that to help in. And it takes standards. We can't do this in a place where everything is custom built. We want information to get where it needs to be, so the custom part happens at the point of social or medical care, not necessarily in the places where it has to go and get. So our approach has really been finding solutions that are one to many, or building things that are not just point solutions, they're platforms. We can do many things with the one thing. So as we move forward in the future, we'll continue to search for those possibilities like Da Vinci implementation guides that utilize FHIR, a standard architecture for exchanging information, to enable us to build those things and make it successful at ultimately getting that information from point A to point B without even thinking about it, much like when you buy a chocolate bar at Safeway and it shows up on your bank account. You don't, you just expect that to happen, which you should expect the same thing from healthcare.
Semira, I'm going to ask you a similar question. What is Providence's approach to interoperability, and why is it important to you?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you. And I'd like to tailor my tailor my answer to value-based care. So Ken, you mentioned early on, Providence is a very large organization. Providence has hospitals and clinics in Alaska, Washington, Montana, Oregon, California, Texas, and New Mexico. And in all those areas, we have patients that visit our clinics, our hospitals, ambulatory care centers, and so forth. So what interoperability means to us, as Anna touched upon, is it's a standard way to be able to ingest and migrate patient data throughout all of those different ecosystems, right? When we talk about value-based care, Providence has about 150 value-based care agreements. And for the audience, if you're thinking about your typical fee-for-service contract where you go to the doctor bills for something, they receive reimbursement, value-based care kind of takes that and turns it upside down and says, we're looking at members and patients from a holistic standpoint. We're looking at how do we provide services that are upstream to you to keep you healthy. So with value-based care, it's important to look at all sorts of data. Anna mentioned your Fitbit, perhaps data from other offices, other hospitals. Perhaps you went to a hospital while you were on vacation, and even taking a little bit upstream, data that we get from your insurance companies. Interoperability gives us a pathway, especially through FHIR and through the use of standards or implementation guides in this case, to essentially speak a common language and have a common architecture for exchanging that information across platforms, across EMRs, across analytics devices and platforms. So it really is taking all that information and making sense of it and normalizing it and streamlining it so that it can be actionable for analytics, for our clinicians, for vendors and partners and so forth, for anybody who is essentially involved in that patient care spectrum.
Semira, I'm going to stay with you and ask you this question. The American Medical Association, the AMA, recently reported a statistic that 62% of physicians in the US were experiencing burnout, and 20% of physicians are planning to leave their current practice within the next 2 years. How can interoperability impact those very scary statistics for physicians?
I will say that interoperability is not a solve-all for everything, right? It won't change the way that people feel or, especially during the pandemic, having intense, long work schedules and people traveling, right, to be able to provide care to so many patients in need. So obviously interoperability won't change that. But a problem that it does address, and I think any of us who have received care from the time that we were, teeny tiny little into adulthood, understand that when you go see a new doctor, they have to request medical records. They have to take your history. They have to look at anywhere and everywhere that you may have received care, and that takes a lot of effort. There's a lot of burden placed on physicians and on clinical teams to be able to reconcile that information so that they can provide the best care possible for you, and so that they can tailor it to you, right? So I think that's where interoperability does make things easier. The idea behind some of these use cases is that when you see your physician with a press of a few buttons, they should be able to reconcile all of your records. They should be able to have information at their fingertips so that they're not chasing everything down over a period of time, so that they can have that one-on-one time with you. So we can eliminate that burden of having 10 different workflows depending on which payer a patient may be contracted with or have insurance coverage under. So really the goal of interoperability is to simplify those workflows and to be able to give physicians and other people who are involved in the care process more access to the data that they need to be able to do to be able to provide the best care possible.
Yeah, I like that, Semira, because I think it takes a village. And while we're talking about providers, and there's so many people around that interop can help. Let's move on to DaVinci. And I have to point out that with sponsorship from Providence, Opala became a member of DaVinci this year, and we thank you for that. You two are very active participants in the DaVinci project. In fact, we should acknowledge that the both of you are recipients of the DaVinci Community Champion Award, recognizing each of you for your contributions towards advancing implementation guide use. I want to personally say congratulations. Semira, tell me about the current state of industry standards for sharing health information between health plans and providers, and how does DaVinci come into play?
Sure. And I did see a question about whether, this is a provider-driven approach or if payers are involved. And I think this question definitely answers that. So DaVinci, if the audience is not familiar with DaVinci in general, is a FHIR accelerator under the HL7 umbrella. And so what DaVinci does as an organization is they bring together payers, providers, app developers, EMR developers, HIEs, really so many people involved within the US healthcare system, the government as well, right? CMS is involved in this process as well. And so what DaVinci does is, and let me actually take a step back, because you asked about the current state. So I think now knowing, we all know what DaVinci is, but the current state is that there's kind of this misconception that we do not have standards for healthcare data exchange, that they're still being developed to a certain point. That is true. There are things that we haven't thought about through these FHIR accelerators, but there's so much that has been done. I know we'll talk about member attribution a bit today and clinical data exchange. And there have been implementation guides that have been tested and implemented for prior authorization and eliminating the burden associated with that. There have been implementation guides that have been very successful in the payer community for payer-to-payer data exchange and so forth. So the state of interoperability currently is that there is a great opportunity to partner with payers and providers and many other companies to make this a reality. We know that there's nothing that happens overnight. The F in FHIR stands for fast, meaning that you can pick up the work pretty quickly and implement it. But we also know that the data that's currently stored in EMRs and your data warehouses, your cloud data warehouses, whatever it may be, it can be messy. Right, there's no one-to-one relationship in a lot of these elements, these data points, but it's a good time to start. It's a good time to look at these implementation guides. It's a good time to think prospectively and see where the industry is going and get into the middle of everything that's happening. It's a good time to be able to provide feedback and to advocate for what payers and providers and others need before it does eventually hit rulemaking one day, and then we're all just kind of thrown into it. So I would say the state of interoperability is very solid. There are a lot of peers and providers who are actively participating in this space. And if anybody else is interested, it's definitely a good time to get your toes wet and start into this process.
Yeah, I would agree. Anna, what can we expect from the DaVinci project and other interoperability stakeholder groups in terms of progress, say, over the next 1 to 5 years?
Yeah, 1 to 5 years is a long time in tech. Every 6 weeks, we get faster processing speeds, and something is discovered, right? So a lot, you can expect a lot to happen in the next 1 to 5 years. One important piece of legislation that has really created, I think, the tipping point to where we're really going to get unlocked to be able to do some pretty incredible thing is the CARES Act and its requirements that it holds to clinicians and the EMR vendors to have data available in a standard format that we could access through this new well, it's not necessarily new because banks have been doing this a long time, but that we can access through what's called an API. And when we have that capability to speak the same alphabet and language in healthcare from point A to point B, from one digital ecosystem to the next, it helps with patient safety. It helps with the ability for the record to follow the patient. Out of the Da Vinci group specifically, you can expect more mental diversity. I think people are going to come to the table to help create in partnership. MultiCare's mission is partnering for healing and a healthier future, which is why we're heavily involved in Da Vinci, because like I shared in the beginning, health data and information doesn't exist just in its traditional place we think it does. It exists everywhere, and we need that mental diversity to help us solve for this problem that is very difficult. It's not an easy one to solve, and we have to do it safely and securely, and we do that in these collaborative groups that Da Vinci creates to enable us to really get to the highest maturity of a product. Like, this is the highest and best we can do it because we have this diversity in that group. And we have all the players at the table saying this lens and that lens and this lens. So you're going to expect that many of that, you're going to see a lot of that in the future, especially with the fact that we're being held accountable to make this data and information available. The next thing I'll speak to is that a lot of this is like iterative. I don't know if you guys have heard of waterfall versus agile, which they're two principles of like managing a project or a product or anything. You can manage your household this way, which I do with 4-year-olds and 8-year-olds. So my agile is the fact that you're constantly trying and refining, trying and refining. You're not waiting for something to get perfect before you start doing it. So scope perfectly defined. Nope. Not the waterfall method. It's trying something. And what you're going to see from Da Vinci is you're going to get those draft implementation guides on how we share data and information for quality measures, or how we share a patient's record information so it can follow them from payer to provider to Fitbit to wherever it needs to go so they can own it. All of these things are going to happen within the walls of these accelerators or within coalitions who come together, the party of the willing, to make interoperability happen in healthcare, because it's not going to be something that's constantly mandated. It has to come from that mental diversity. We can't have one thing saying the way it is. We need to create something that's looking at all the lenses to enable that mature product to be developed. And another thing is, I think you're going to see more people adopt these standards, whether they're mandated or not. I see there's a question about mandates, and those do help push people along. It also helps vendors put on their roadmaps that this is an important thing for us to achieve. However, if we're coming together without our egos involved, we should be doing this anyway. And those are what those coalitions are going to do. So yes, there are new regs coming, possibly under prior authorization. That's, I think, CMS 9123. Yes, I can say these numbers because that's the world I live in. And I think you're going to see more regulation around other, not just EMRs and pumps that sit on an inpatient unit, but other private sectors having to enable endpoints so that that data can be shared to the patient, because that is what the care is going to be centered around. And really, every human needs some type of healthcare. This depends on who you are and what you need, and we want that data and information to help somebody make that decision. We can't be custom in those worlds. So I think you're seeing more adoption, and we're adopting an implementation guide called ATR, which is attribution exchanging in value-based care, who we are responsible for, so we can match their identity to our systems and all the systems that support the health of that population. So that's what I think the next 1 to 5 years is going to look like, and I hope we really do it. And I would ask that if you're on the line, show up, come do it with us.
I love that plug. Anna, how about if you elaborate on how interoperability and the adoption of industry standards supports value-based care? You started to touch on that, but how about if you take that further?
Yeah, so one thing that CMS has put out in their map is by 2030 that every type of clinician taking a Medicare payment would be in some sort of value-based arrangement. And the reason for that is because we realize that incentives under value-based care promote more well-being and holistic well-being more than the fee-for-service world, meaning I go to the doctor for an encounter and it's just this one thing we talk about, and it's not the whole self that we're talking about. So value-based care is here to stick around. It's the right thing to do. So that's set the line just with that. And that is why MultiCare is making the journey to get to do this work. And interoperability enables us to have more information and knowledge about the patient. We could predict diagnoses, much like genetics can. With more data and information in one pool, we can help use the technologies like AI, machine learning, natural language processing to the advantage of the humans to help identify things that maybe normally we couldn't. This is the time for big data in healthcare. And if you think big data is cool, then come on down to the party because we need your brain on this. We have to move into a space where we can share data under value-based care and make better decisions for our patients that ultimately cost them less money and bring them to a healthier life. So really, interoperability in value-based care is I like to say, the dirt under the foundation. It's full of gold. It's dirt full of gold, but it's not even the foundation. It's something that we compete on without anything else. Like, okay, for example, Elon Musk, he said, here's my stuff for my battery. I don't want to compete with you on the battery. I want to compete with you on features on the car. This is the same thing for interoperability. We need to get to that point where we're all sharing how we get data to point A to point B. So our money and dollars and our energy, our spirit are spent on improving the healthcare experience for patients, not this, how do we get data from point A to point B? It's gold dirt under the foundation. We have to do it. Let's get the best brains on it and make it happen. And let's not compete on it. Let's compete. I'm not data hogging. I am trying to get it to you so you can make your best decision. And hey, I'm going to try to make that the best care possible here at MultiCare. And that's why I think this really needs to go and why I think it's important to value-based care.
Semira, you want to add on anything?
Sure, absolutely. So I think it's important that we talk about different facets of data exchange within value-based care, because I think, Anna, you hit a few very important points. So from a patient journey, I think people typically go in, they see their doctor, they receive a bill a little while later, they're confused by it. I am, and I've been in healthcare for 15 years. Think, gosh, what component is this? There's 3 more coming, right? But value-based care is so different, right? So Anna mentioned ATR. So when you sign a value-based care agreement between a provider and a payer, an insurance company, you have a predetermined list of criteria that you're going to, as a provider, essentially look to and that you are promising to do essentially. So one of the things that's important in this list of this criteria list is knowing who your members are so that you can provide outreach. I talked about early on that it's important that we reach out to our members before they end up in an urgent care or an ED or inpatient. So one of the things there is we need to know who the members are within this value-based care agreement so we can reach out to them regularly for their preventative screening, their colorectal screens, their breast cancer screens, making sure that their diabetes is in check if they have any of these chronic conditions. So that's an important piece. Within value-based care, we know who our members are. Not only our payers looking at their members, we're looking at our patients and providing prospective care to them, making sure that they have a PCP, that they're coming into the office, that they're getting all their screenings and labs and everything else. Step 2 there is we communicate very closely with our payer partners to say, here are all the tests that were completed. We're closing the gaps. We are showing you that we are providing holistic care. We care about our patients, obviously. And here is proof of everything that was done. In return, because payers have access to patient data. You're on a plan. You register with specific things. They'll send us gap lists afterwards and say, okay, well, the look back period for, gosh, I don't know. I don't think the colorectal is a 1 year, but I think it's much longer. But the look back period for this test, it's 10. I knew that. But HEDIS check. Let's say the look back period is 10 years and Semira hasn't had this test done. My information will be included in a gap list that gets sent back to the provider so that they can do that outreach. On top of that, providers are receiving claims data so that we can look at your risk, look at where you're getting care, look at how we can better tailor things to you as a patient. Providers are also receiving financial data so that we can make sure that we are aware of where we stand within our agreements, that we can reinvest some of that money from those agreements into providing better care, into more community initiatives and so forth. So this definitely isn't, although there are some transactions there of data back and forth, it's not a transactional approach. It's really a patient-centered approach. We're looking at holistic care. We're looking at how do we get the information that we need to provide the best care to patients? And I think if we can think about value-based care outside of this whole transactional relationship that I think people often see between payers and providers and other parties, then we see it as a partnership to really focus on getting patients the best care that we can give them. And we look at how interoperability opens those doors. So currently, what typically happens is, I mentioned Providence has 150 contracts. For each of those 150 contracts, we're likely getting data in 150 different ways, just for enrollment. A patient's name can be listed different ways. Data can be received in Excel documents and text files and everything else. You have to build processes in order to be able to ingest that. And interoperability provides a solution to that. You have a set of an API that you're able to use to retrieve data. You have standards based off of FHIR and these implementation guides. And you're essentially able to create pathways towards seamless, scalable data exchange between those two parties, plus many more, to create that ecosystem where providers have access to data that they need to provide care, and payers are able to participate, give additional data, do additional outreach on their end, right, to make sure that their members are covered. So yeah, I would just say that interoperability in this case and the impact that it has on value-based care as a whole is just, you can't put a price on it.
Yeah, no, I agree. Anna, how about if you walk us through how MultiCare is using the value-based contract attribution lists now that they're delivered in accordance to the Da Vinci standard?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I just want to say, Semira, you're spot on. It's the most important part. How we're used. So one of the most important things in value-based care is to know who you're responsible for. If you don't have the identity of the populations you're serving, you can't match that identity up to the information, at least that you have for the time being, on how we can contact that person or ensure, maybe we're seeing some of that intelligence that your health is rising and your risk of health. And can we get you some support services that enables you to not get over the edge in some of those disease states? Those are all things we need, but we have to know who the person is first. And the ATR, which is risk-based membership, so you can Google FHIR ATR risk-based membership. You'll get to view the implementation guide to see what it is, but it essentially is similar to what you would find in any type of quality reporting Excel document. We're talking rows and columns, but in a different way. And the best way, back to Willy Wonka, to explain how we exchange data in this new way is that because the way the tech works, it packages up in a nice, candy bar. It unpackages it in space in those little dots, and it goes across and it repackages itself on the other end. And because of that capability, we can send mass amounts of data in a frequency that we determine. So it's dialable, right? You can turn the pressure on or up. To make that happen. And ATR is one of those things that we're working with several payers. So one to many, one solution, one to many, Opala is one of the vendors we're working with in a particular exchange. And we're working to make that in the background. So we take this standard, we aggregate data all together, we master it, we create it, and we match it to downstream systems like an EMR, like a high and rising risk intelligence platform, like a notification. If you go into the ED, we can get a notification that you're there, and somebody can help you get a next day primary care appointment to help support you in whatever has happened in the ED experience. So all of that is huge. And by putting ATR in place, we were able to replicate a 95% match rate across systems instead of what, and some of you are going, well, that's not good enough. And I'm going, but we used to have 70% match rate in healthcare, which you're going, why? Somebody can match me in my bank information. Why not healthcare? Because we don't have a unique identifier, and quite frankly, I don't think we ever will. So we have to solve for this in a different way. That's why we need all the brains, come join the party, to help us make this happen. And ATR is one of those solutions that is the foundation. It's the gold, it's the dirt that makes us enabled to use it for managing those populations in that situation. It's not, and it also enables us to go, okay, hey, patient, you're moving to Arizona. Okay, here's all your stuff. Take it with you. It's yours. It's not ours. We're not data hogging again. We're trying to make it interoperable so that really the achievement is community health and your best health, your best life. So using just this one thing, this little simple thing that you're like, don't we already do this? We don't. We need to get better. And so that's why we've chosen this pathway. And that's why we really think risk-based membership is an ATR implementation guide is like the dirt, essentially, that we need to get in place before we start anything else.
Ken, would it be okay if, before you ask your next question?
Yeah.
Thank you. I think Anna just talked about scalability and the one-to-many. And I think it's important to compare it how that works right now, even for something simple is probably not the right word, but something streamlined like enrollment lists, right? So currently, if you have a value-based care agreement, while you're talking about this contract and before you sign it, you typically have some sort of data addendum that stipulates the kind of information you're expecting to receive for your patient list. But then what? How do you get that data? Is it via an email? If you have 150 contracts, who's keeping track of that? How do you ingest it? Is it a portal? Okay, so maybe you have to change your password every 90 days. And how many people actually have access? And what happens when your portal administrator leaves and then you're stuck, right? Is it SFTP? We're lucky enough to where we can automate SFTP and drop it into the right folders and apply all the right permissions. But even that, you're adding IP addresses, things change, processes fail. You need to have a way to essentially monitor that on a monthly basis and then put in fixes when it does fail. So now think about this. Let's say that you even have 20 contracts and you have variability for every single one of those contracts. And within those contracts, the elements that you're getting, the fields, are all different. Maybe one you can have a patient's name as a single cell, and another it's going to be the first name, last name, middle initial. Sometimes you don't get the last name and you're saying, hey, we're missing information, right? There's so much back and forth. And you need a lot of individuals focusing on this. You need a lot of expertise in normalizing this data and ingesting it, as Anna mentioned, into the EMR and downstream analytic platforms and so forth. So there's that. It's a headache, right? It's not ideal. We've been in the space for so long and things constantly break, very fragmented. And then you switch to ATR and you switch this use of APIs and to having an implementation guide that both parties can read and understand. There's still some back and forth and understanding the components, but it's a one size fits all. And once you have your infrastructure set up and you go on to move to another partnership with a payer, you've built your infrastructure. You can leverage that. The scalability factor there is absolutely amazing. You're not going back and saying, oh gosh, it's another SFTP, or what is this portal? And what if we don't get the data? Now it's in TXT, and none of that. When you receive the data, if you're using a fire server, there's safeguards that you put in place as well. They're automated checks. The fact that you have scalability at almost a push of a button is just so important, especially when you compare that against how the industry runs currently. right? What the norm is currently.
There's no emojis, but Semira, heart you.
Thanks.
No, you're spot on, and you kind of went near this, but talk to us about Providence was pushing their health plans to receive clinical data for quality reporting following Da Vinci CDEX. Explain to us the importance of this for Providence.
Sure. I think we can't say pushing because I do want to put it out there. Absolutely encouraging, because there is a standard, right, for clinical data exchange. It's an implementation guide, just like Anna said with ATR. If you Google CDEX Fire IG, the HL7 Fire website will pop up and you'll be able to see that. It's a phenomenal implementation guide. But I think we can all acknowledge that over time, this process of data exchange has to change, right? Where I just talked about ATR and that data coming from a payer to a provider. Providers send clinical supplemental quality data, right, for gap closure to their payer partners for a few different reasons. It can be for 5-star, PIA, stuff like that. But so we at Providence do have our own proprietary format. It is I would say, clean enough proprietary format where the majority of our partners who ingest this data are able to do so. I'd say fairly easily. I'm sure there's some normalization that has to take place there, right? But we've also heard back that there's times where our partners don't want specific fields, or they need additional data, or perhaps they need the data parsed in a different way than what we consider to be standard. Albeit there isn't a single data exchange standard for clinical data right now, but that's what CDEX gives us, right? CDEX is based off of US Core. It's a pretty broad implementation guide that essentially allows you to do the same thing that we talked about in reference to ATR. You build something once and you can scale out. We're no longer, well, we are currently, but in the future state, we would no longer be sending you data via a CSV through SFTP or one of the other modalities. You would have access to it through an API. You would have access to your bundled population. So for the entire value-based care contract, you could potentially have access to individual measures at the end of the year. If you have 10 measures or 10 patients where you see that the breast cancer screening measure has not been closed, there's additional gaps, you can query for that directly. CDEX, in my opinion, provides a way forward to standardizing clinical data exchange, to standardizing the way that we share information for our value-based care contracts, although it does not have to be limited to that. I can see how this would work for a fee-for-service population as well. It provides a path forward to eliminating the use of proprietary formats across the board, because as difficult as it is for most provider groups to ingest member attribution data, to ingest it into their EMR and everything else downstream, I am sure it is just as difficult for our payer partners to do that. If they're partnered with 20, 30 different health systems, and each health system is sending them clinical data differently. Perhaps one health system has a smaller population. They're going into their EMR, they're pulling the data points manually. Perhaps they're sending it to you in a PDF, just as screenshots that something was done, whatever it may be. It's a way of further fortifying that relationship and making sure that the data flow between the parties is fortified, and that there's a standardized way to promote that.
I like the point you made that it goes both ways. It's not just a one-way pipe, and that's a really good point. Let's move on to the most important participant, which is the patient. And I'll let either of you, but I have a feeling you're going to arm wrestle for who gets to go first about patients. Why should patients even care about interoperability? Because let's think about this. Most patients don't even know they're on a value-based contract or what that means to them. So talk to us about that. Okay, who wants to go first?
Oh, okay, sure.
Right.
Sure. Like Anna said, it's all about the patients at the end of the day, right? Everything that you do, like healthcare, is patient care. Your question about patients not knowing about value-based care, that's absolutely a true statement. But what I think is happening within healthcare is we're kind of seeing the shift from, patients kind of being kept in the dark, not really understanding how to get the care that they need, to more of an app-centric, consumer-centric approach where members are becoming their own data stewards, right? There are things like MyChart where you can log in easily and see your appointments, see your test results, communicate with your clinicians and so forth. But we know that MyChart is great for Epic, right? There are a lot of other EMRs there. And so I think what interoperability does, a few things. One, for patients, it provides a new pathway towards accessing your data through third-party apps. It gives you your own data at your fingertips, right? Your phone. And so if you have situations where you move, like Anna was talking about, you go to Arizona from the Northwest or whatever it may be, you have access to your data. That's extremely important. Your data in a way that you can understand it, in a way that you can show your new clinician, to where you're not looking for a website to, log in somewhere and then hoping, to print out a stack of papers. But I would say that interoperability really promotes patients being their own data stewards. It promotes patients being able to take charge of their own healthcare. It gives them access to be able to schedule faster appointments without being on the phone. It's empowering. So if there's one word there, I would say that interoperability is empowering for patients. So if you take that and go with it, I think that's what interoperability does for patients. It empowers them to take charge of their own healthcare. And it's kind of like Anna mentioned banking and I talked about the consumer market. I think before you can, you schedule an appointment with the doctor and it's kind of blindly and you're going, oh gosh, I hope I like this doctor. There's so much more data available now to where you can decide whether you're going to like the doctor beforehand. There's work being done in terms of price transparency. You can look at rates and how that could impact your bottom line and how much you're able to pay, right? I think it just opens the doors to really view healthcare from a patient-centric approach, and it gives patients the power to take charge of their own health.
Yeah. Anna, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I'll add that number one, Semira, you're spot on the empowerment. Having open access information is always empowering. To learn, to know more, to understand, and to essentially give a patient a vote. Hey, I like this feature. I like this type of healthcare workflow. I like this. You get to do that when you have the power of your information to do so. And interoperability is just that dirt that makes it happen underneath everything. It's 100% for the patient, in my mind. It enables payers and providers to work together more efficiently and effectively, and that is to a patient advantage, because as Semira mentioned previously, it's not just a transactional relationship anymore when you're able to share in this different way. And I know there's some questions that were put in when people registered for this webinar about blockchain and about translating meaningful value. All of this, think about blockchain on top of interoperability. That means we have the capability to work like a ticket master, where you say, here's my chart, scan my QR code, and now it's all at your doctor. And every time that doctor uses your data, because it's now tagged in a blockchain security environment, maybe you get 1 cent for that, or 2 cents, or 3 cents, or whatever they want to use it for a study. You get money in return, or you get reimbursement in return because you participate in something, and it's just your data they're using. So it's also empowering the patient to have the capability to know where their data is going, where it's being accessed. This is just step one to get us to that place that enables our patients to have more of a vote in where they want healthcare to go, just by their consumerism and their dollar, and by the fact that they'll have more information at their fingertips. So it's so important to enabling our patients to have that number one holistic view, because data isn't in one place anymore. You get to see everything. Like, what does it mean that my heart, my HRV, whatever that's called, resting heart rate when you're sleeping at night, is low or high? And hey, is that going to influence my cardiologist's decision about my health, how we approach whatever is happening to my heart? Yeah, it is. It's totally going to. So let's get all this stuff together. It only enables us to be more mature as a human race. I'm going to say that it does. If we get healthcare more mature, we're going to live healthier lives and possibly longer. and more diversity comes from that. So, and I mean that in a mental way, like more people to think of great ideas to help the world advance itself. So super important, and super important to why we're investing in that in MultiCare, because we are partnering to make that happen.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. First, I want to thank both of you for your time and your insights. And I know I appreciate, and I'm sure the audience appreciates everything that we've discussed today. You both have astutely answered a couple of the questions that have come in from the audience throughout the discussion, which was great. But I'm going to throw one more out there that was submitted, and it says, are there current or upcoming payer interoperability mandates that providers are excited to have available?
I can speak to that, a couple
Okay.
of those, Semir. So one of those was the CARES Act. Even though price transparency is difficult, it's the right thing to do. And the CARES Act also holds accountable our vendors to put this stuff as a priority in their development cycles, meaning they will build that capability into what we're having, much like Opala is building that capability for their payer partner and us that we're working with. So those are really, and it's very important to have those in place and make it happen. That CARES Act helps make that happen. The other thing we're super excited about is the possibility around using FHIR as a transaction to report quality measures. So Semira was saying using CDEX to help close quality gaps. Well, what if we could use data exchange for quality measures to report our quality measures to CMS under what they have an initiative called eCQM, Electronic Quality Measurement? What if we use FHIR for that capability? So we're excited to see what could come out of that in possibly a rule or a reg that enables vendors and providers and payers to kind of put that as a priority to make that happen. And then I will say I'm really excited about CMS 9123 because that is prior authorization, and prior authorization in more than one place has been pegged as a $2 trillion, that's a T, not a B, $2 trillion problem. And if we can solve for getting patients at the point of care and answer yes or no, you're approved to have this procedure, it's done in a very intelligent, smart, codified way, and we work to ensure it doesn't have the bias that we know that can come from electronic algorithms, we will be enabled to get a patient an answer right away. Or we'll be able to say to a patient, hey, actually, I need to send you to PT for this many times, and we need to try this medication before you can have this procedure. And hey, maybe those things will solve your problem first. It's a best practice, it's evidence-based. All of this interoperability builds on our capability to find the best evidence base, because more pool, the statistic becomes more relevant as we see more people out there and we start to identify digital twins. I don't know if anybody knows about the digital twin concept, but there are people that are similar to you out there in the world. And if we knew how their medical history was and it was similar to yours, then we might be able to say, hey, this happened to this person. And I'm not saying it's going to happen to you, but it's more information to make a decision on, which is really what we want to empower patients for, is to make their own decisions about their healthcare, or a partnership decision about their healthcare with their healthcare provider and their family that supports them. Super important. So we're super excited about prior auth, because if we can get authorization done with robots, and mostly robots, not humans, humans used for the complex authorizations, then we're enabling care to happen faster and more safely and more securely. So we're really excited about that CMS 9123, and MultiCare recently went live with prior authorization because these implementation guides aren't solidified. We're just going to try it, and we are, and it works. It is super powerful. I thought people were going to be like, get this out of my face. I don't want to see it. I'm going back to my old ways. But now they're just lining up. Like, how do we get more through this methodology? And that is the intent, to have a one-stop, a one front door for our clinicians, so they don't have to click 50 times, so that our payers and we all come together to enable providers to have the least amount of burden, so the time and energy is spent on the patient. So CMS 9123 is super important to us, and we hope that that, something comes to fruition of that in the future. Anything from you, Semira?
Yeah, I love all of that. And I love that you talked about the CARES Act, because something that came as or was created as a result of the CARES Act was TEFCA, right? And TEFCA stands for the Trusted Exchange Framework and Common Agreement. I've said it so many times that I'm starting to forget what it is. So essentially the goal by ONC, so the Office of the National Coordinator, part of the government, was to create an on-ramp for nationwide interoperability. So to remove these data silos, whether that be between payers and providers or researchers or whatever it may be, and to allow patients to have access to their data, right? I talked about patients becoming data stewards. So the plan behind this is that you would have a network of QHINs, Qualified Health Information Networks, which essentially act as little mini companies. And those QHINs would have participants, say a hospital system or an HIE or an individual, whoever, right? You just have to meet the criteria. And then you would have a group of sub-participants for every single participant. Those QHINs would talk to each other. This is why patient matching criteria and security is so important. But those QHINs nationally would be able to talk to each other so that you can get the data that you need in a very timely and quick manner. FHIR is going to be an important component of that. And one of the reasons I think this is absolutely cool, well, two, one, providers will be able to get access to the data that they need. Remember, we talked about physician burden early on and removing that, but also patients through individual access services. So third-party apps, patients can get access to their data in a more streamlined manner without dependencies on just one system, without, going to a doctor and hoping that they have that and you can access the data and reconciling those records through the use of QHINs. In theory, you should be able to access your data regardless of where it is in the country. Same thing with providers. They should be able to access your patient data regardless of where you've received services, and insurance companies. And through this interoperable nationwide network, you wouldn't be operating in silos, right? You would have a liquid, your data would be liquid, and you would be able to provide the best care to your patients. Your patients would be able to take charge of their own healthcare. Insurance companies would be able to do additional outreach and research and everything else. Like Anna mentioned, research companies would be able to get involved a bit more. Obviously, there's a really heavy security component there, but I'm truly very excited for that. I think it's going to change the way that we look at healthcare, and FHIR being a component of that. There's the roadmap that was released if anybody's interested in reading it, or an implementation guide now. I think it'll help streamline a lot of that and make the process a lot smoother.
Yeah, Semira, I agree. We're focusing at Opala about the longitudinal record of a patient, and the more dense data we can have, the better information we can deliver. So you're spot on. Okay, I'm going to wrap us up. I'm going to do one last plug for the GeekWire Gala on December 7th. Everyone gets a 15% off discount if you go in and use the code that was mentioned at the beginning. It looks like it's going to be a great event, so I hope to see everybody there. On behalf of GeekWire, I want to thank everybody for attending today, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Take care.